Tuji Chelimba, Tamchin Chimba, the Babo, the Devi Chula of the Lord, the one the other, giving in solitary, Chido, Chula of the Lord, on the Dover, La Badala of the Chankazaba, the Gedula, Lord Judges, my Babella, Jacabo, Baba, Romba, Cajulaman, so the Homi Chiji, Jover, Tasso Sanjik and Jogo 1 year of the Jogo, the Lami Chablaso, the Hesson Dog, Jella Chuchi, not so many Joa, Jelos was, you know, the large laws about Chujin, the so. This is the one day people tiny or you put your dog in Banabata. The tired one people to do mambo pay. There's some jealous summer, some of the church. Gang in the Hajang Garchen Rinpoche, they shut up your boy Hingi. There is some pay your rate. The end of the suddenly the paper took the cheese, Russian directions.
So first I would like to say Dashidella hello to my Dharma friends, those of you who have come from close by, many of my old Dharma friends, and also those who have come from far away. So thank you very much for coming. You all came here because you understand the importance of this gathering. You see that it is very meaningful. So you came here with a mind of wisdom and compassion. And so for that especially I would like to thank you. And again, Dashidela.
Double the Kitado, Tachi Yore, then Martin Jitiba Kitashi, Chingum married, in the young Kang in the dark, subject of the Devan Robata, Domin Madubati, same day only die only Teritella, that Devan Dobata, Maduba Chicton, you are married, Doba Chupa and Barres, Doba Chupa, you're not Doba and drop top down, Trishap Chechong Ralevari, Trishap Nabani, Tanjati Shirap and Justin and Lepe Shirap Nison. The Shirap Nigayopati, Magnigayopataveri, 3 million Rachila Tongoa, the Mantin, then doubling the Murumboche, Drogonali, Hajan Chipar Sapa. Roar Surya Rinpoche on your marry, Rinpoche, somebody don't chibo, your three the one that so meaning of the in get us a double chapter your the way was so double thought the double 3 months okay get a hot submission or it.
So tonight we will talk a bit about how about the nature of happiness and also suffering in this world. And so in general, I do not really know how to talk about worldly matters so well. But one thing I do know is that we all share an equal wish, and that is all beings wish to be happy and nobody wishes to suffer. Because since there is mind, whoever has a mind, when there is a mind there is a self. And when there is a self, then that self wishes to be happy and it doesn't want to suffer. So there is no one who doesn't want to be happy. So on that level we all are the same. We all have the same wish, that is to be happy. But then whether or not we actually accomplish that depends on our intelligence, our wisdom. And there is 2 types of wisdom. There is the worldly wisdom and the wisdom that transcends the mundane. And these 2 types of wisdom are like 2 eyes, 2 open eyes. And that is something that especially a human being can accomplish. So human being, a characteristic of a human being is that it can express itself and it can understand the meaning of what is expressed. So in this world we are born as human beings, and of the different 6 realms of samsara, the precious human birth is the most superior one. It is called precious, and none of the other types of existence are referred to as precious. So the human birth is described as precious because it can accomplish something very meaningful. Although this evening there are a few people here, still the words that I'm speaking, they will spread around the world, and so therefore it becomes like a global meeting that we are holding here. So for this reason, I be very careful on what I say.
그 시랍을 남바지 직티브 시랍 직티 내베 시랍 예소 동 답변에 들이 동 답변 대바 gün이지나 에 동답게 그반이 시랍 시바데 직바도 이 말에 강리잖아 시잡시세 상지 잡아 제송 직티서 고고선 말이지 인나가다 시랍 최초로 시랍 나바니 차요래 시랍 나바니 진나니다다 단 직tinbe 무조건 봐라지네 다다다 답을는데 딱게 던 레바카리 임바 다다카리 임바 망주저까지 차과 들었어 못하니 되는 직지 감대야지 당나다 직지 감대 들이 야지 치보 조요래 이래야지 서주고 무보다 치면서 치마라지네 제르지네들이 따요래 되게지네들이 라게 대화도 탑 동리방의 탑 제가 주름기요래 매동 제대로 세나양 들이 다른데 동리를 도토고요 말이 제가 뒤에들이 직진 바다 답이 출력된 다 답을 출력하고 다 그요래 출력 답제 손 도르드는들이 남 샘소리야 샘르드는들이 샘데 박간리 임바 바다간리 임바 마음관 조절간리 임바 셀스를 딱게 당에 샘르드는 이제 판나 되는 것은 남바 사집에 된바나들이 들었더니 대화가 조상 동생이 조스티는 판에 사지 좀 들리고 남가데 된바리 들었더니 파치리 주로 탐지에다 시소 상을 와도 되는 대화 차고 차이고 요는 다툭되는 대화 맞자고 사요 말이 들었더니 록니가 되시나 답이 주로 던지기 록니가 송들 같으면 들이지 며칠 강라 다다 대화를 다다 니와도 동인 리바용고 요래 답을되나 니와도 동인 리바용나 다들이 제다 제되나 다 동인 매바고나 다다가 동인 단위 제서 받아 마음과 동인 요호시바 대답을 남들이 들지 출력 삼피게 되니까 요호 받지 저들 잡고 나와 사제베 수남 탑지 절에서 이제 밑에 대화고나 들이 독이 좀하고는 저런 거 어떻게 해 봐. 뒤등을 때는 이제 답이 출력 답이 다 요래죠.
And so there's these 2 types of wisdom, the worldly wisdom and the wisdom that transcends the world, the mundane. And so actually from the perspective of the ultimate truth, ultimately, there is only one wisdom. There's not 2 wisdoms, there's only one wisdom. Thich Sumgön had said, the Buddha is the one, the Buddha mind is the one that engages in all the things of knowledge, engages in everything. So it is one mind, but due to various degrees of wisdom, and we talk about 2 types of wisdom. So in a worldly sense, when we apply wisdom in a worldly sense, through this wisdom, the wisdom mind, in a worldly sense, various sciences have developed. Scientists have investigated the past, then the development into the future, into the present, and into the future. And so, looking at these outer developments, they are trying to develop the world further and further. So, more and more development and the outer world. And so, the world has developed greatly so far. But all of that is only looking outwardly, looking at the substantial outer world. And in this way, doing that, the point of doing that is to find a way to experience well-being and to become free from suffering. But no matter how hard one tries, one can still not become free of suffering, only by relying on the worldly wisdom. And so for this purpose, many religions, spiritual systems have appeared in this world. And the spiritual systems in this world, they are trying to find happiness, but from within the mind. They are trying to find true happiness by observing the mind, by trying to understand the mind. How was the past mind, the mind of the past, and then how has that affected the present mind, and how will the present mind affect the future mind, and so on. So the spiritual practitioners, they try to find happiness by looking at the mind. And so that is the purpose of the Buddha's teachings. It is to find the causes of happiness, practice them, and to give up the causes of suffering. So this is what the Buddha's teachings are showing, are teaching us. This is the path. And the various other religions have found that the way to achieve happiness is by creating its causes and not by focusing on the results. So that is, once suffering has ripened, we cannot turn it around. So we cannot turn around the result of suffering. We must actually avoid the causes of suffering. So developing in this way, it seems that ultimately, sometime later, the worldly systems will actually meet together with the religious, the spiritual systems. There's no other way to go. So ultimately, we therefore should really practice the union of both the worldly and the spiritual system. And so now in this life, we experience both happiness and suffering as a result of various causes that we have created. And so if we understand that, then we will be able to tolerate the suffering that we experience now, and we will also be able to avoid more suffering in the future by avoiding its causes, by abandoning its causes. So the various spiritual systems, they try to bring about happiness and eliminate suffering by focusing on the causes, the creation of the right causes. The Buddha also has said all phenomena arise in a dependent relationship. They all arise depending on various causes. So therefore, if we wish to experience happiness, then we must also create the right causes for happiness, and we must avoid the causes that will lead to suffering. And so this is the reason why various spiritual systems, various religions have spread in this world.
소소라니 나다 다다데다 취재 타박을 개발 용지지 들고가 양미들이 강양 말이 얘네랑 담비 출었더니 강기 계속 마보도 채네 담비 출었더니 그 사람들 타게서 냠용냐고 이제 강이 이제 담비 출로라고 상지 왔다와데 담비 취시와데 동네님 보인바 동네를 핀바 이게 더요래 저 가리지는 셔도 양당 딱게 당말이 딱게 당나 들이다 가리지는 따다다 별나 가서 무슨 참만지 내가 배바타비 출에서 해봤자 요래 제발 요래도 있나 그냥 타버는 되는데 라기 정리는 마시는 동이 싸워를 타게 속고 요 말이 때 탐때 뭐저 강리지는 별나 누가 저들 마시는 배는 내지 싸워 마시는 내지 뭐 마시는 들이도 그 사제 속고 요 말이 제 배는 다다 잠들려나 다 당보 딱지 땅 거래 당보가 당지 딱지서 오 잠들이나 다가 내보다 손을 가리쳐 것도 나이 그 배차만 뭐서 야 다 보통 총아야 무슨 좀 세상아지 버리지 대상을 호 배차만 뭐지 강만만 요리 대상들 동의도 토로 동의적고 요리 배차세라더니 족바인 거 배차세라더니 소제 거래 배차세라더니 다 라소리 땅이 요리 데르스들 야지도 간이 대화 요리 말 차로 동의 요리 동의 실에 채와래 대양 말이지 야, 다 때는 가야 매력지 버려서 대양 말이지. 때문에 그래서 속고 탐지 요독이지. 속고 탐지 속고 창나서는지 고르서는 속고 탐지 눈이 실에 치와래지. 야, 다을 보는 걸 버려 데려도 그래지. 강에 데려 치와래지. 강 따뜻도 그래지. 이래더니서 국산 잡을리도 눈이 그랑지리지. 우도 코가 눈이 잠소지. 다 때려 제다고 제고들. 뒤들이 참말 내가 매발해야 돼. 내가 매발 말이 가시는 거니 멋진데라 르는 나타매봐. sem을 등이미가 레줌들이 지어봐. 따따다 로당들을 로자카라 톱들이 묘진에 들이 셔틀이 마고요리. 배는 미래 차자는 몇 가시는 자는 tuk지 다 보지 않는 손에 다 다롱들이 그 자신의 내 요리 고소사비 캠사서 세상모다나 제일시네 다 제일 동다서 요사래지 사지 가서를 써먹다나 레스토치 모르지 제일 써먹들 뉴딜 스리지 지지서나 들이 제일 되면서 뭐 저서 가래리 다 저서 뭐지 지라 들이 소소가 되 저서 담고 짜시나 들이 우리 저거서 따다다 제고 탁쇼를 마도 주디 말로 뛰는다 동행 고고 탑 제설 제장들이 문이 잘해지 여기 고고 탑 무슨 섬에 들이 소소나 여기 관이 좀 말이 소리만 말이지 관련 문이 몇이 대양 자상한 몇이 개발을 해서 많은 시험이지 뒤 누구의 말이다 뒤들이 욕시 좋고 사지지 민생으로 이피게 샌들에 내 값다 타서고 대화 탐시 용화상 너희 참아 단지인들이 좋아 단지는 용과 좋아 제일 이치제네 들이랑 그런 것들 남들 톱네 딱 강소는 그렇게 쫓아서 제일은 양놈 됐다 봐서 연설이 이게 자체 그래서 네와 그 담세대 네와구나 어때도 라고 하거나 우리 소설은 네와 토도 이게 네와 토사에서 들이때 가사칼라니 소디마테 진네 강 시시고도 제 주로리 시초가 답질라 대마도 진오디 제케밖에 비시니 레스로가들이 말이지 메시 트럭좀 고초 좀좀 마토 잡아라는 이래들이 셈 타톡라게 레주레레티니 다 삼마르 삼티오바 다 테로 삼티에서 랑라 핀바 이나 핀바 내가 제가 하고는 따들이 잘 타도 며칠 살아 이거 차서 세회는 그냥 놀라고 주로 답이 쇼요면 용띠 강연 말이지.
And so I personally am not somebody that has a lot of learning and really I'm not really like a Kempo, like a great scholar who is really qualified to teach the Dharma. And also I'm not actually, have not done extensive practice and so on. However, in this life I have encountered many difficulties, much suffering. And that has helped me gain a lot of experience. So because I have encountered a lot of difficulties, I was able to experience how the practice of the Dharma can really resolve all of these difficulties. So while I'm not someone with great learning, I am someone with a lot of experience in this life. And so I have learned that the practice of the Dharma, the understanding the Buddhist view, actually really is a remedy for suffering. It really helps to eliminate suffering. And so through my personal experience, I gained a complete certainty in that. Because I myself have tried, I've investigated that. And so all of you who have come here, my Dharma friends, you were all devoted to the Dharma. You came here with faith, really from the depths of your heart. But more than just having faith, it is also important to really understand karma, cause and effect. Because if we do not understand karma, we will not be able to resolve our suffering. And that is because if we don't understand karma, we will not understand the causes of suffering. And if you do not know the causes of suffering, it is like if you do not know the root of your illness, then you cannot actually cure your illness. So in the beginning, it is important that we do analyze and really contemplate, we think about things. For example, we look in this world, there's all kinds of happy people in this world. For example, some might think, I'm very rich, everything is going well, or I have a good family, I have children, husband and wife, and so on. Everything is going well. But then, for example, we see those who are very rich, who have a lot of money, they still experience much suffering. Because they have a lot of money, they fight and they even kill each other. Then often attachment to family and relations leads people to commit suicide and so on. So although there is much development in this world that we think will lead to happiness, to well-being, because we are attached to our own well-being, we only create more suffering. So then one might think, well, there are still some who experience only happiness, who are completely well. But Milarepa said, actually, those who are rich, they actually suffer from all their possessions. And then, on the other hand, one then might think, then maybe one is happy if one doesn't have anything. But that is also not true. Milarepa also said, and those who are poor, they suffer even more from the lack of possessions. So when we look at those who are very poor, they are even worse off many times. So anyways, everyone experiences suffering. So everything in this world has the nature of suffering. So we talk about this ocean of sufferings in samsara. And so since everything has the nature of suffering, it might feel a bit daunting, and we think, what can we do then? If everything is suffering, there is no happiness. So it is therefore important to understand karma. That is why it is important to understand karma. To understand that there's some people, for example, who don't suffer so much. They have no illness in their bodies. They are happy in their minds. They trust in karma. There are some people who just live happily until they're like 100 years old, and then they just peacefully die. There are some people who have survived the First and Second World Wars, and they're still alive now and still tell their stories. So that might seem all strange if you really think about it. So then we see this diversity, and that makes us think that there is a reason for that diversity. So then we think about the teachings of the Buddha. And of all those teachings, karma is most important. So trusting in karma means to understand what are the actual causes of happiness and suffering. So we must find those causes first. If you are able to avoid the causes of suffering, then also naturally you will avoid the results of suffering. So in the worldly sense, no matter how hard we try to avoid suffering, not understanding karma, we will not be able to escape suffering. So I myself, again, do not have much learning. All I really know are the 37 bodhisattva practices, and even that I don't know completely. I cannot explain it like a great Khenpo. But anyways, in one of those verses in the 37 practices, it says, all suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. The perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. So the altruistic mind, that is the only cause of all temporary and ultimate happiness. Self-grasping and the negative emotions, are the only cause of all suffering. So if you only trust in that, then you have found the right path to go. Then you know how to create your own happiness. And so this is how I myself have found happiness. And so through this personal experience, I thought that so this is how I found happiness, and so if they also want to be happy, then they should really know that. They should know what to do. I should share that with them, because then they might also find a way to experience happiness. And so that is really why I am distributing the 37 Bodhisattva practices wherever I go, and try to explain them to the best of my abilities to my Dharma friends. But again, I'm not a great scholar, a great spiritual master with much learning, with much quality, many qualities. Actually, from a worldly perspective, I'm more like a bandit. I've been in war, I've experienced poverty and famine, and like all the difficult things in this world. But I have understood the workings of karma, and ultimately found that all happiness really comes from a mind of love. That benefits oneself and that benefits others. So that is what I have learned from my own personal experience. And therefore, as a result, although I experienced suffering, difficulty in the early part of my life, now in the later part of my life, I have found happiness. And so that is the experience that I like to share with my Dharma friends, although I do not have many other great qualities or learning.
다 싫어 다 마시게 됐다 그래요. 다 세리지. 다 싫어 가리리. 별로 그 몸을 세 따라는 땡시 삼모당나. 조광을 로니 셔거는 공을 조광을 운이 셔내요. 내요는 님마ጭ을 계사다 정말. 걱정 잡나. 나 요새 랍트에 직동. 이 엔초가 딱지야 당시요 말이지. 대박 말이지. 고속고속에다가 대박 말이지. 대마치 거기 지진소 된밤 ter직소 골라마 된게 내 요래 더러 파 중주제는 중주제만 잡지 지마 중장소 소리 됐어요. 그 가리들랑 이게 다시 치도 좀 쳐다보러 와도 좀 말이지 무슨 래 마사바래지 공대서 말이에요. 레레지 레 마사라는 게 가야지 농인동고요 말이지 미리 별은 말 아니다 그러나 다음에 눈에다 송하는 양요는 통요래 얘는 강인체네 다시 생기 저걸 도패지도 좀 먹게 셔야지 당문이 전에 줄여서 봐지 다 싫어 셔야지 나는 맞들어 갈아마지 조금 상을 떼자 저타 지금 이나 집어라지 땅 자카섬 자카 이제 자카 쪽 내바다에 사야 칼라 사방아 좀봐 마원을 제 톱네 아 다와 지금 야수는 딱 띵이 이제 뭐 맞지 레치 바데 같이 레냐고 됐다고 이래들 변화 됐다고 셔트 삼았다더니 준비 뭐 다시는 준비 서가 매봐세 뒤로 뒤 선이 이제 차와리 속지 보지야 됐다고 됐지네 들이 준비 뭐 다시는 다 잡으려는 우리 있잖아 셔트지나 같이 동이 쌈지 못 잡아 요리 동이 이제 삼시 나는 대화 요리 강이 직접 마성에서 다시 봤는지 됐다고 요리 됐다고 셔트지나 야야야야 다 대위 저도 저기 쳐버리지 지상어디 로소로 걸은 거래 대위 저 가래 오다산 바상이 제리지 조고산 지지빈선의 총 제일 삼제의 가와도 되네 이 소소 삼제의 처처는 다 삼제들이 삼제들이 삼제요나 다 놀러 비춰보면 돼요 비추이가 삼제요나 생비대 와서 삼제를 삼바다 유지를 하래 말이에요 대레티니 들이쳐있다 특히 로또 탐제 삼제를 뛰는 경우요래 대레티는 다 Deva Tang, Deva Jutang, Deva Chuchi, Tampo Deva Tang, Saji Lavore, Deva Carido, Tanga, Loju, no Loju, the Sado, the Mexican, Legachi, Topodo, the Judge Carriage, oh, oh, just something, Jabati Tanga Saris. Tevima Salon to the Topodo, the Jubilee, Telesini, or Tanga Tanga, Control, Chuba, Simji, Javaton. Some siloti, Creonity, Deva required late Jubilee ship, so in the Lambda, Tinilam said, Tini, Tata with the Jerome Mahambati, Jote, Dapo Jandu, something is Zuba, Dapo, Calcutta, something you don't Zubia Dapo Javato. Theatre was the Lord, the Kinati, Deva with Jote, coming by the Mudina. Something is on Jimba, something is on Chachan, something is on Zuba. Did you bring a call of some Notana? That TV, they were just about with the Yachtan Karchimbo shot.
A good quality of us Tibetans is they really have great trust and belief in the workings of karma. So because they have this belief in karma, it could not steer us from within when we were in prison. So for example, when we were in prison at that time, some of the prison guards would say, no, you all believe in karma, and no, you think the 3 jewels protect you, but then where are they now? Now you lamas are all in prison, all together. So this is how somebody would think if they don't really understand karma properly. So how could one think if one understands karma? For example, in prison, there was, for example, Lama like Khenpo Münse. Khenpo Münse also stayed in prison for 20 years. However, he didn't have to work for even one single day that entire time. The whole 20 years, he was sitting in his place. He never left his place, and he was just sitting there meditating. He could do that because he claimed that he was ill. And there was no really good doctor there actually, so nobody really knew how to really diagnose him properly. So nobody actually could deny that. So he could actually say that I'm ill, and nobody could say differently. So therefore, he didn't have to work, and he could just stay there and meditate the entire time. And also during that time in prison, actually there was a practice. Everyone was like criticizing and trying to find faults of others. That was just piling up. Everyone was doing that. But then still naturally nobody was able to find a fault in his claim that he is ill and he can't work and he has to meditate. So it just happened like that naturally. And so some people said this is like a miracle, but actually that's not a miracle at all. It's because of karma. Because there is the karma, he didn't have to work. He was able to just stay there. On the other hand, I had different karma, the karma ripening from negative actions, and so I experienced much hardship in prison. I saw many people die of starvation, a lot of suffering. And so I did understand the benefit of the Dharma, and I thought that now is really the time to practice generosity. So during that time, for a week I didn't eat anything at all, and all the food shares I got, I just collected them, and after then a week I handed them out to all my friends. And so then later, actually, I was placed into a single confinement, but then actually I was given more food than anyone else. So first 3 meals, then 4 and 6 meals a day, and so on. So within 1 month I was completely recovered again. And so also that again is the result of karma. So that is how I've gained the personal experience. And if you really think about it carefully, you see that karma really is infallible. So when you really think about it, then then a strange feeling arises of this is really true, this is really how it is. So this is how you would think if you really understand karma. So there are some people in this world that experience a lot of suffering. It seems that on the outer level they experience much difficulty, but then on the inner level in their mind they are actually very happy. So it is most important to recognize the causes of that happiness. So when you recognize the importance of that, then karma will enter your mind. You begin to think about karma. So the only cause of such happiness is a mind of love and compassion. All suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. The perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. So that love, how can we find such love? Where is this love? If you have love, actually, everything else, if you only develop love for others, actually there's nothing else that needs to be practiced. Everything naturally will come to you. So everything ultimately depends on the degree of love that you have developed. So we think that we want to be happy, we want to be well in this world, we want to experience various enjoyments, resources in this world, and they all ultimately come from having cultivated love. So therefore the Buddhas always say, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. But what is that happiness actually? For example, you have some joy, you experience some joy. You think that you have some resources that bring you joy, and that is because you have worked very hard in this life, so now you have some resources. But what's the actual cause of that? It is because first there was love, and because you loved, you practiced some generosity. So then you think, I probably must have been generous in a past life. Now I'm rich, so now I need to be more generous. I need to make offerings to the 3 jewels or be generous to sentient beings. And in this way, you are walking a path from happiness to happiness. So if you understand karma, and then you will find a path to happiness, right now and also in the future. It all depends on a mind of love. If you have love, then you will naturally practice the other virtues. And love needs to be protected by a mind of patience. So first you recognize the cause of happiness, that is love. And because you love, you are generous. Because you love, you practice ethical discipline. Because you love, you practice patience. And then as a result, you experience happiness. So when we talk about karma, it is first very important to recognize what the actual causes of happiness are.
다 야요래 되게 차별 삶아도 등에 뭐나 속을 싸우죠. 제일 레벨이 영요 말이 디콜라 삶아도 되게 최선을 다한 잡을게 딴 잡을게 작업 가시는 축받았다 등에 요래 작업 가시는 디다를 맨 어디 작업을 설제를 가야 등에 요 말과 야 얘는 낭낭크는 삶아도 되게 미리 설직도 요 말이 속속 같은 거 너무 총총들아 너무 체본 통구요래 너무 희바대 내가 마시나 땅고 등에지 세바 탑 하고서 오 등에지 강리 별로 몇줄 샥주 제거나 다시 등에지 봐 루그스를 전 총조로 덮고 요래 조고 짜고 요래 등에지 봐 오 되게 팽기오리 상처를 다 빼샤바보다 송망보다 다 사람들이 가공부여 땅아 샥주 제거데 삐도 선두 신자 따라들이 동해dem이 봐서 탑 가게들아 오 다다 동해 상지 소리 레레지 레드 가게 싸서 레드 소속을 이모 박사서 오 땅에 지와 토마 몇번 가리치고 땅에 몇세 요새 그만 잡요살이 땅이 동서들이 레고를 삼거든 지가 고상을 땅 거요 말이지 설렁하게 가야지. 난 레상이 그만 쏘고 가래. 로아를 루센지 선지 유 멋쩍 봐도 요 말이지. 유뭐 봐지 다다양. 그제도 마야 되게 싸요 그러지. 다들 동안 코크서 그러지. 너무 싸워라고 유뭐 봐. 유모가 대응이지는 쫙코랑 그러지. 내 봐야 쫙 구지송 마음을 쫙 줄래 같이잖아 동해지. 동해 그만 마상콩을 동해지 마. 다 속여래. 이 말을 유모가 레지나 이 레박차 레족요래. 설렁하게 레 맞지다. 유모가 레지나 되게 유모가 간호자 되니 맞지를 누가 레 속치고서 아무려 되네. 유모바는 어디죠 갈세도 다 참하게 사다가 등에서 유모가 낳고요지. 문에서는 유모가 나가리 하고요 말이야. 솔직히 내 해당에 있는데 차도에 있는데 나제레시 누구에게 싸워라면 유모봐 대탑지 싸워 가는 적도 나오자 봐 능이 말이 나대도 누구 삼지 다 나대에 요리지 나대에 맞지 직접요 말이 야 나대 집다 가리지 다음에 샘지 이빈이 이제 사속서 말이나 콜 동나도 거기도 그 바닥나도 거기도 너바 가르쳐도 거기도 고 다음 삼때 요로 다음 줘봐요리 오다 동네 말이 나한테 미살라 이 유모바 독세 탐지 80일 남나 저때 싸지 오다 유모바 탐지 싸 나지 되게 니뭐 찍게 나지 세고 털 가리여도 나지 우선 세빈 차원도 차도 쌍 낭자상 자면 낭념을 줘봐. 가라여가는 알았고 솔로가는 알았고 배샤가는 알았고 대사들이 뭐 지미 삼적 가가를 본적다 쭉 배샤가 봐서 약가요 말가 faksabar dana changore tiri to ge ra shi ja de sa de thong ngore che sam je zawa kare o da ji thong do de na ta ngone dong ge sa da ji de ge ni bo le ta yin pi lo de na ta ni ma na ji le so ni zawa go de wa ta de je sa de bar che de mo che de ka go de wa zawa ya de thong ngore thong sam de wa ya de ba che de zo ba thong do 야, 타톡들이 사바다니 이제 촉치보네. 타톡 사지 공부가 쌈티 싫어버렸더니 쌈티는 지네. 사바다니 이제 싫어버렸더니 들이랑 게 다이면 사지 공부가 톱톱아 되지. 그래서 뭐들 준비했던 말이 준비마다 가는 시기요 말이. 때문에 내 말이 되게 추시인 말도 되게 추바도 가는 시기요 말이. 피고를 세게 핑기요리 마도 다 진짜라고 다른 대화는 산이 동안에 용어요리 대회 소설로 필마시라는 좀 맞아 뒤에다가도 상호따라 동안 그 저리 뒤에 상호따라 대리 기분 유모가도 문제는 뒤에서 소설로 필이서 주로 나베 니는 돌아오 대답을 내세야 니는 뭐 돌아다 대다 데리게 받다가지 열에서 생각해서 엄마도 랍시요 말이 제가라는 회사로 올리지
So we can think about it we can think about karma on this smaller sense, in the smaller scale, and taking smaller examples, how a negative state of mind leads to suffering and so on. But also in a larger scale, when we look into this world, the great wars and the suffering in different countries all depend on various causes. For example, America on the outer level does not experience much suffering. But then if you think about it from the inner perspective, then actually still everyone suffers. There is no one who does not suffer on the inner level, in the mind. So we can see the outer but not the inner, and we all experience suffering on the inner level. So for example, in countries where there is not much outer suffering like here, often even a slight problem, a small problem, is perceived as a very big problem. And so if we do not understand karma, then we have really no way to avoid such suffering. If you understand karma, then actually you will see suffering often as a beneficial thing. For example, you're doing a surgery when you're sick. So when you go for surgery, your body is cut open, your flesh is cut open, like your belly is cut open. That is uncomfortable, unpleasant, but still you do it because you think it is good for you, it will help you. You spend all your money on it, and you're still very happy that you can do that. You think, now I'm going to have this really good surgery. So we don't actually perceive that as necessarily negative. So that really shows that suffering is also just the way we perceive things. It comes from how we perceive things. We can learn that through our way of thinking and perceiving things, we can also transform our suffering. So now, first we must recognize that any experience of suffering is my own karma. And who has created that? It was my own mind, my own negative emotions. So the karma are the actions that we have accumulated since beginningless time in samsara. So then, knowing that, you might think, so in many past lifetimes I must have killed others, or must have been a thief, or I must have beaten others, and so on. But actually there is no need to think about each of these actions that you have done. These are only the outer actions of body and speech. But who is the actual culprit here? Who is the actual one that causes the harm, that creates the negative karma? It is the negative emotion in the mind. And that is the same in all the sentient beings' mind of the 3 realms of samsara. There is only one afflictive emotion, really. It all has the same nature. And it is that emotion that is within your mind right now. And that's the one that has created all the suffering you are experiencing now. That's the one responsible for all the suffering you have experienced before. And if you continue to have that emotion in your mind, this negative emotion, it will create more suffering in the future. So it is important to recognize one's own negative emotion as the actual enemy to be eliminated. That's the enemy that causes all harm in the past, present, and future. That's the one that has accumulated all the karma. And so for this reason, we experience the ripening of karma, we suffer, and before it's over, we already create more causes for suffering, suffering upon suffering. Even within just one day, how many causes of suffering do we create? Actually, each time a moment of a negative emotion arises, you are placing an imprint into your mind stream. So if you do that the entire day, within only one day, how strong are your negative imprints already? So it is very important to recognize that negative emotion in your mind. And that's the one that has created all suffering. So often when we talk about the afflictions or the negative emotions, we talk about them, but nobody really actually understands what these 5 afflictions actually really are. So it is important to recognize them when they actually arise. So this is anger, this is jealousy, this is pride, and so on. And then what is the root of them? Why do they arise? It is because of the I, because we cling to the self. So all suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. There is not a single negative emotion which does not arise from the self, grasping at a self. For example, on the other hand, there is a bodhisattva who does not grasp at a self. No matter what you do to a bodhisattva, you can beat a bodhisattva, it doesn't bother them. You can harm them, you can steal from them, it doesn't bother them. And they still are patient and they still love. And that is because there is no self-grasping in their mind. In that way, the afflictions are transformed into the path of the paramitas. So the root of all the various negative emotions, the afflictions that arise, is self-grasping. So that must be recognized. So then, once we recognize that, then how can we destroy? What's the only antidote to self-grasping? Altruism is like the sun that melts the ice. Self-grasping is like ice. For example, it solidifies your mind. You think I all the time. So that selfish mind causes all disharmony in your family, for example. In your family, you think that's my house, or that's my money, these are my clothes, and so on. I want all of that. And so because of this selfishness, you eventually separate from your family. And then all that money and all those possessions are useless. Your family has become your enemy. That causes a lot of suffering, in the end even leads to suicide. And so ultimately it all comes down to the I, the self-grasping. That's the real root of all suffering. And so altruism is the antidote. It is the sun that melts that block of ice. So may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. Temporarily, if there is love, then we experience happiness in the 3 higher realms. Because when there is love, we practice generosity, ethical discipline, and patience, and the happiness of the higher realms comes from these actions. And then ultimately, when love becomes very strong, then through the paramitas of meditation and wisdom, we attain enlightenment. So actually, through the paramita of meditation, we develop love and compassion further, and through the paramita of wisdom, we attain the state of enlightenment. So if you think about karma this way, you will see that karma really is infallible. And so that is important to understand, and that is really all I know and all I really know to share with others. And so often when we receive teachings or when we get instructions, then we are told you know, all these details of you should do this and you should not do that, do this, and so on. But then often when we do this, then maybe it's helpful today, but maybe tomorrow again we experience suffering. By doing this and that, we actually cannot really ultimately resolve our difficulties. So therefore I go to the root, because personally this has been of greater benefit to myself. This is how I have resolved my own suffering. And that root is to recognize the cause of all that suffering, and that is my own negative emotions, my own self-grasping. And so finding that really has benefited me greatly, and so for that reason I'm sharing that with you, my Dharma friends. So if you find it helpful, you enjoy listening to these words, then please take them to heart. And if you do not enjoy listening to these words, there's probably also other ways to resolve your suffering. But actually, I don't know any other way. So this is the only thing I personally know, and I do not know much more apart from that. So actually what I'm doing is just sharing my heart advice.
내가 핀바오나 대타가 삼고도 무슨 핀에서서 야명 요리 강 요리는 따뜻하게 용나 너희 지금 내상 요리 삼는 상고상나 제일 전에가 다 소속에 동의 장르 조금만 서밖에 모르고 땅을 내상야 요리 내상도 요리 야 대화지 용나 대화지 너희들 잘못다 말했어. 너희들 똑바로 대해요 말했어. 꼴에서 왔다면 로고 요리했어. 다다동에서 그 팽그 요리 싸움다. 야, 대화도 유나 당나 딱벌 내다가 대화 짜고. 다 놀러주 요바바다 조망도 받다다 파선 조발을 나참에 받아서요. 내가 맞다 말했어. 니레 가래라다 레가 꼴로 싸움들 삼바다 니지를 레레스. 내가 삼바다 니지 문추들나 그 도저파나 파마 강을 소라는 강을 삼바다 되었지나 제 나쁘잖아. 삼제의 용기들 별 조로 되었지나 네 조들 되어야해서 그 말이지. 조들 되어야지. 되어야지. 처럼 배우고 조라 배우고래. 라지 돈인도 봐도 나 되어야지. 되어는 바로 도대야. 영토관이 가요. 나냐 버대기요리. 나랑나 배우고가 다대요. 제대로 먹고 제 소방형 배우고래. 되어야지 딱 보자고 그랬지. 내가 조디 오 가시 코로를 나가 오 조디 코로를 나다 나주가 공거리 니 조디를 더 떼와서 잡고 자고 그래서는 오 조디양 망고를 양자 조양 저 이렇게 버리 때마다 저게 따뜻한 일이 막가리 따뜻한 세월 좁고들이랑 그 서버ጭ바로 차들은 맞을 찌지도 코로들의 체험해 봐오네 이 파마보고 빨라들이 라가 노르다로 좀 강과를 보내들이 보고 파마는 막아와차 제들이 파마보를 막아와차 하더니 이가들이 파마미 손을 동하고 이제 들리 쪽으로 보고 잠시나 대답에는 파마를 답세 차를 고소하기 멋지더라 약고 차소를 말이 직계나 제가 새로 마음으로들이 파마 답세 차소로 삼지에 들어가 채소는 동인이 주고 요래 내가 걸어서 못하나 대답을 차는 대답들이 놀러 쪽으로 터고리 사람을 때렸더니 펜싱을 삼지고 놀러 쪽으로 말이 삼지 소리 삼 대답을 삼는다나 들이다다 계속 가려서나 오 지는 고초가 린지 그래서 들이라고 요래 보아 때문에 지는 고초서 그 때도 그 요만 고초서 그 가르치 고초서 그 삼바다 힘지 건데 레드비 없고 제요래 레드비를 삼바다 힘지에서 가지고라 지는 제가 레서 받으랬더니 들이 삼바를 지는 gemba 처럼 조바라서 보다 내가 털이 되었어요 토마티 문제는 삼재가 좀 삼재에 잡아 탑도 고소서 같은 거 우리 고소서 난도 주로 같이 그 고소가 난거 요래서 고소가 나면 삼재에도 보면 잡을 수적에 보여 말이 고소가 나면 삼재에도 고소서 탑 난거 요래 우리 고소대 가래 사지 고소 시작 그랬지 뭐라고 시작을 했더니 레주비 하고 그랬지 주 고소들 삼재에도 보자고 요래지 삼지를 뛰니 오 사지가 살람 뛰니 사지 쪽으로 말이 남들이 뒤를 뛰니 대답을 걸 아니 됐잖아 오 내가 고등에 따니 돼 저거 요리 망발아들이 또 이게 고로 요리 내가 펜바사 다섯 대가 뒤를 주비시 바라더니 뒤 소소나더니 랑글라고 하더니 강에 탐지 세네다다는 이 생물 등에 저람 오 상이 생아 등에 얼마리 샘지 시지 얼마리 때서 앞에서 보자야 같이 보여래 맞도 가디는 리드 토로래 리든도 혼납지도 버디 리드 나나다 보자야 용말이 내 강야보다 리스 하고로래 뒤를 참이 집에서 강에 자다 니에서 고소 가도래다 고소 마셔서 삼바사 버리지 다 보자면 너보시라 자야 용말 나보자로 걸어 용말이 리즈동 그 말이 쪼대 사바다 힘제지 저 세번 걸어 정도 하고 서나 들이 다다형들이 편수에 삼세에 들어와 띵보 들이 차용 거요래 제 마시들이 따다다 서다블에 동에서 싸놓고 또 마시라고 동에 차고 싸놓았다나 들이 말이 듣고 직동해가 로마틱 따뜻한 걸 하도 듣고 차서 나한테 좀해도 오셔서 너게 왜다 하도 타고서 매동에 레레서 잡을게 동에 때나 오 같은 회사 가야 말이 있었니 서 샤지 요래 잡을게 똑같아서 삼지로 싸놓았다나 내가 소시 동에 폐기 요래 가사가 뒤 잡을게 동에 가길래 오 시작을 차도 그래서 들이 소소 시작다 차도 정문지서 봐 대회는 돈은 다 동이 님보라들 레좀 돼서 싸놓 당신은 은근히 소소를 평해서 대회에 당시 남용을 꺼내서 시발에 동시서 동바라 가서 시발에
So I'm sharing my own experiences, and I found that has really benefited myself. It really helped me, and therefore it will be of benefit to also share it with you. So thinking about this really has resolved my own suffering. So when you experience suffering, then you should think, when I experience suffering, that purifies my negative karma. So this is how I have thought, for example, when I was in prison. During that time, I actually felt quite happy in my mind. I knew that this is my karma, and this experience is purifying my negative karma. So I was able to tolerate, to accept the difficulty I'm experiencing. And also I know that it will pass. It is impermanent. The same is true for well-being, happiness. It also will not stay. So knowing that really helps you to resolve your difficulties. Then you can always experience happiness. But then there is no clinging to anything. Everything will pass. For example, even if you are happy, even if you're very rich, you have a good family, you're not sick, that also passes. That also is impermanent. That is the temporary fruition of your own karma. And that is the karma, the fruition of karma committed with a mind of love and compassion. So when you know that, you should think, I should practice more love and compassion continuously in the future. I must protect my love for all those surrounding me, my family, my friends, and so on, my parents. That all is the quality of love. Now, for example, if you love a friend, you might think, I love that friend, so I'm good to him. But actually not only. Actually that love really benefits you the most. It benefits you both. We talk about accomplishing the benefit of others and oneself simultaneously. It is because you love others. So for example, you love your friend. When you love your friend, he will be happy because he wants to stay with you, next to you. And then you will be happy because you love that friend. So in this life you are happy, and also it is the cause of happiness in future lives if you sustain this love. Then even if that friend gets angry at you, you will be able to practice patience because ultimately you love that friend. So if you remain patient and you keep your love for that friend, then in the future he might again become your friend. So that is what is most important, is to keep the love within your heart. And that is important especially for us worldly beings, because often when we love somebody very much, in the beginning at first it is like our minds become one. It's like you become one. But then one day we get angry at each other, and then that anger is even worse than any other anger. And then we fight. For example, parents and children, they fight about the parents' houses or the parents' money. And then they don't get along. They start hating each other. And by doing that, actually the children, with their greed, are really plunging their parents into the 3 lower realms. They are breaking their samaya with their parents, and then even in this life, first of all, they will not be happy, but also they will experience more suffering in future lives. So it will only lead to more and more suffering. And that comes from our grasping, our fight for the parents' wealth and so on. So when we think about that, then you should think that what I really need is love. Nothing else is important, not the money, not the wealth. What I really need to keep is love. There's a Tibetan saying, it says, if you are happy, then this happiness is the kindness given to you, is the kindness of the 3 jewels. It is given to you by the 3 jewels. So actually the 3 jewels do not really actually give you your happiness, but what that means is that the 3 jewels introduce you to karma and love and compassion. So you cultivate love and compassion and engage in actions with a mind of love. You practice generosity, ethical discipline, patience. So as a result of that, you experience the happiness of the higher realms temporarily. And all of that is the quality of love. So the 3 jewels gave you really more the method. They showed you that that is the cause of your happiness. So you applied that. And therefore we say the 3 jewels gave you all your happiness. In other religions, actually, they say it very explicitly. The jewels gave you all your happiness. So actually the 3 jewels cannot really actually give you something. But what they give you is the method, that is to practice love, and that you must sustain. So the 3 jewels gave you that method. We say the essence of the Buddha is wisdom. With wisdom mind, you understand karma. The wisdom mind knows that the Dharma is love and compassion, and therefore it can practice, it can sustain, cultivate a mind of love. So the Buddha really gave you a path of practice, but the Buddha himself cannot grant you ultimate protection if you do not engage in practice. But if you use this path and engage in practice, then temporarily you will be able to accept your suffering, and in the future you will be able to avoid more suffering by avoiding the causes of suffering. So therefore, knowing karma is the temporary benefit and the ultimate happiness. Only by knowing karma you can resolve all difficulties. And so this is what I found personally. It is really understanding karma that is most important, the mind that is most important. Within my mind, I do not experience much suffering. Even if I die, I do not experience any suffering. If I die, for as long as I die with a mind of love. So therefore, we should remember these words in the 37 practices. All suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. So that is really most important. The mind is most important. So often if we don't understand that, if somebody doesn't understand that crucial point, then they will not protect their love, and so then they focus on the outer level. For example, they don't want me to die, but then there's no point in holding on to a body. Body is impermanent, and we can't keep it. We can't keep the body. It is also said in the 37 practices, consciousness, the guest, will cast aside the guest house of the body. We can't keep this body. It is only temporarily. So if we know that, then we will not pay much attention to the body, but rather to the mind, and understand that what we want to bring with us from lifetime to lifetime is a mind of love. And so that is more important. It is more important that we now establish a good relation, of a stable relation of love to each other. Now, if we don't understand that, then the slightest difficulty on the outer level, the material level, will cause us some tremendous torment in our mind. For example, what just comes to mind is a disciple who once came to me and said, I am so sad, there's no one who suffers more than me in this world. And I said, what happened? And they said, my cat has died. So that is a sign that they actually don't really suffer all that much. But because they have not experienced greater suffering, to them that is a great experience of suffering. And of course, it is undeniably very sad, and it is great suffering. But then if you put that into perspective, then it diminishes in some ways. For example, if you compare that problem to the wars in many countries in the world, then actually your suffering, your problem appears to be very insignificant. So in that way, if you put things into perspective in this way, it will really help one resolve one's own problems. So this is actually what helped me very much. And so then once we understand that, we must also see that who is the one that has created all that karma. It is all the result of my own anger, my own jealousy. That's the one who has created it. So that is the one that has created all the suffering in this world, and that is also present within my own mind. So then the suffering that you witness on the outer level can also help you to recognize those same afflictions in your own mind. So thinking about karma in this way has helped me greatly, and therefore I'm thinking that it will also help you. I am just sharing a few words of my own experience since we have some empty time tonight.
똑바로 대성 드라마를 드라마를 망보 연구요래 오 타고 시작하면 은혜 요리나 오다 가시 그 샘리 송도 시작합답지 샘리 야와 샘리 송도 은혜 요리나 대자와 시작요래 샘리 다다양 샘리 다다 이제 나와 샘리 샘로 박차 톡다 되는 도와를 독디 박차 톡보다 최는 자공다고 차는데 샘리도 요래 다고 시작하면 이제 랩 만용 은혜 자차자 요사래 즉 야비 샤고시 감만동데 마비 조반지 뒤에서 공송은 좀지 기적 사브랑 속이소 마트로도 속차 탐지를 되는 자차자냐와 요사래 또 속차 탐지 속들이 치를 같이 그대로 좋다고 말이야 시에당도 똑똑 떼는 뭐도 봤더니 심진군제 다마 때라서 속차 탐지 강거라도 그래 시장도 차도가라도 그것을 접차지 그래 늦게서라도 접야지 대학동만 인생이 코드 레드 사마사도 됐다 볼때 그 말이지 저 섬대생이 보여랬지 사파 값을 치면 대생이 뭐지 그 내가 레버 차지 다 손놓고 문에도 됐다고 소차 말이지 야 다보지 가리를 차서 되나 산쪽색을 하도 그 차였어 배는들이 뭐 삼바는 hin기지 쭉 담배냐면서 쳐내나 쭉 그래요 또 요말 쪽과 요말 줄 핀지 삼때 다항 삼때 삼바는 hin기구나 대능이 산쪽 삼지 산쪽 색거라도 다 보시 간 이거래 자자자 요사리스 요라 대위는들이 마음이 성성냐가 요다 요 시당도 차도라도 됐다왜 제가 무슨 집에서 좀 돌아서 봐. 이랬더니 박차를 리는 새로되게 찍었네. 다당 가서 그것도 속비 받았어요. 고등 가서 속비 받았어요. 고등 가서 톡톡 요말 빼나. 답안한 거 이거 조처럼 망고 차대우나. 제 담시가 고등 가서 똑바니 됐어요. 마치 고소 똑바니 됐어요. 레당 박차 가까이인데 저기 토과배가 차대요. 그래서 동무보니가 맞다 빼나. 대답을送给나. 제 담시 문이 레줍지 싸먹고 이거래 대리더니 탈쪽들이 있으면 봐 돌아더니 탐지 나와서 저라고 대통다 보니 사직을 보고는 매번 믿으라고요. 나 매바들이 차요 요래 들 가시는 무슨 나발이 좋다는 애들이 가서 도바처럼 담으라 연구요래 대파요나요. 대 탐시나 대 어떤 나발만 좀 춤무고 춤매야 되나요. 춤무고 되는 dim리는 뭐좀 도사로만 나가. 고도로 대화 연구를 제일 등의 연구를 제일 다 가서 등의 무슨 시작요래 제일 되는 레기는 말로 도사로만 나가요. 축해 라고 말하는 니가 하나 세나 주변에 캐랑은 소속돼 가로 탑도 갖고 온 거래. 다 주변에 캐만 가로 탑 요마 다 라시자야 마도 라시 잡나 주 등에서 타고 요래 되나 타고 요마 주 생구들 박차 생구들 다디 박차지 소라를 뒤에 독박거든 등에 양장도 용네 바디를 다 용고 요래 바로 이질을 다다리 득발해 배나 됐다가 타야요 말이 지고로 삼았다더니 문이 서당 서이나 탐지를 맥기세우네 매너들이 두개 다제 조금 매독사 내 소소한 거다 제레지
So there are many people who have become Buddhists, and then because they have not learned so much yet, they have a lot of doubts, they ask many questions, they are uncertain about many things. For example, they question the reality of the Pure Lands. They think, is it really true? Do they really exist? Because some say it's just mind, the Pure Lands are just mind, or the hell realms are just mind. So they have many doubts about whether or not they really exist. So saying that hell and Pure Lands are just mind is true, but also now this life is just actually mind. We have created that with our own mind. All the ways we perceive things in this world is our own perception, our own mind. It is the very strong habitual imprints, the conditioning of our mind leads to various perceptions in the 6 realms of samsara. These habitual ways of perceiving have made our mind become like ice. So it is all really made by the mind. So therefore, although maybe I have not gone to a Pure Land, I can be certain that a Pure Land really exists. And that is because Lord Jigten Sumgön had said the fruition of karma is the fruition, the ripening of the momentary thought, the projection of a momentary thought. So, for example, when we look at an animal or the experience of animals, for instance, then only by that we can gain certainty in the existence of hell realms, for instance. So nowadays, through science, we can see all kinds of beings in the animal realm. Some experience more, some less suffering, some are very frightening, some are very sweet, some are very aggressive and hurt others. And why is that? It is because that body, in that being, is a natural reflection of hatred, of jealousy. But then that is not how they always will be. When that karma comes to an end, then they will not be that animal anymore. So in the Vajrayana, therefore, we say all beings possess Buddha nature ultimately. So when all of those habitual imprints are purified, then there's still only Buddha nature, and then there is no more animal. They're not really animals. So how can we think about the Pure Lands? Pure Lands are the manifestation of bodhicitta. And for example, we can understand that in the form, when we think about this meeting, this gathering here, and some people come together, they love each other, they're compassionate, they're very happy, then we are very well here together. There's no fighting, there's love, there's kindness, we see each other purely. So naturally, it is like a Pure Land. We are very happy. So understanding that, we can also understand that how the Pure Lands come into existence as a natural reflection of bodhicitta. And so in the similar way, the lower realms, like the hell realms, are the natural reflection of hatred and jealousy and so on, the animal realms and so on. And so when we now all of these beings, although they appear in different forms, forms which are bodies of habitual imprints, the suffering that they experience in their mind is exactly the same. So for example, we talk about beings with a form or without a form, but actually that all does not really inherently exist. So from our perspective, we talk about beings without a form. But then, to them, we are the beings without form, because they can't see us. We can't see them. That's why we call them formless beings. But they also cannot see us, so they call us formless beings. So actually, perhaps in space and everywhere we move through, there are those cities and towns of these formless beings that they also use as their space. But we don't interfere with each other, and that is because we have different karmas, different habitual imprints of perceiving a reality, and that is why we don't interfere with each other's reality. And so that all shows that all of that lacks inherent existence. It is just our way of perceiving it. So if you think about karma, then all of this really exists. But ultimately, when you realize non-duality, you recognize that all of these appearances, whatever you perceive, is just the perception of your own mind. And ultimately, it all does not inherently exist. So these are many doubts that people who have entered Buddhism encounter. Even though they are devoted, they have such doubts. So then some people even think, maybe I don't need any religion, I don't need Buddhism. But actually, whether or not you follow a religion, everything follows the principle of karma, cause and effect. There is just no other way to go. So if one wishes to be happy, if one experiences happiness, that is one's karma. Whoever suffers, that is their karma. But if we don't know that, then we cannot deal with our suffering. It becomes unbearable, so often we commit suicide. So ultimately, whether we accept it or not, we believe it or not, whether we want to follow a religious path or not, everything follows karma. Whatever we experience is our karma. Only if you understand karma, then you have a way to overcome your own difficulties. If you don't understand karma, there is no way. Then you might think the only way out is to kill myself. But then if you kill yourself, are you really liberated from all suffering? That is not the end of suffering. Actually, it will only get worse. If you kill yourself, then the mind continues on, and together with the mind, a strong habitual thinking, the self-grasping, and it will only get even worse. As a bardo being with this mental body in a bardo, the suffering will be even worse than it is now. And so there's an endless circle of suffering without any hope of escape. And so therefore it is so important that we possess those two eyes, this of the worldly and the Dharma view. Because only in this way will we be able to resolve all of our difficulties. Otherwise, we have no way to become free from suffering. So this is just my own personal view.
일제에다 내 표가 탐지 받지 주로 님바 망고리 주로 님바 탐지에다 우리랑 강 시시되지 지나 파스를 랍되지라도 하자 배우 지모리 우리 도에서 그러더니 답이 출국받더니 이 각도 세트고 요 말이 너무 치러야 와도 대회에다가 먹고서까지 라리 소리마디 무슨 로마님 바탕에 파도 잡더지 롭되지나 같이 그 추대시도 상고시도 말이 문이지를 레주데 남자다 하고 그랬더니 맥이 소프요래 로마사바 카시에는 라리 소리만 통해 어떤 데쯤 봐서 먹었지 근데 리서치를 해서 샵 이체보는 대도고 내쪽으로 들어도 들이치는 망보리 들이 라시 잡는 망보지 쏘서서요래 들이 나다 충충리지는 진짜는 딱 기비시지 장미 받다다 배파들이 좀 말라 기비시니 장미 받 펴고요래 제 tamchi 문이라다 꼭 견디 송답지 톡사지 문이 지들이 아까도 치보리 제 탑질에 대바다 하나야고 제래 제 소소가 강시지랑 게 줄라 레주르를 지지나 어디 밀을 하면 다고랑 시지를 문이 편결이 제 소소는다 용기 가용면에 접들이 지요 디들이다 남게 다음에 같이 계단이 그 망고리 내가서 로마카시기나 로마 충충지나들이 매갑자사 도다사들이 라는 소리 파트 뜻이 제대로 요래 문이지나 다 비무치고들 취시발의 비무치 매도 취시 강을 집리래 세위는들 탐지 그 로마 영바 탐지 이 빠르들이 랑가 강치기 제 주도는 나나 들이 소모 땅나들이 다가서 동해 된데 비주를 양동에서 요래 망분 대인선의 양동에서 요래 다다 로버트 등에 들었더니 등에 남았던 것들이 생긴 자공하고 자연거리 대탐지들이 우리 팽기 요래 내 가르침 보래
So many of you, most of you here actually are some of my older Dharma friends that I have known for a while. So whatever you have learned, it is also very beneficial to pass that on to the best of your abilities to others. So in order to dispel the suffering within the mind, we necessarily must rely on a spiritual path, on the Dharma. Without the Dharma, we cannot become free free from the suffering in our mind. It will only become greater and greater. And so because knowing that, I distribute 37 practices wherever I go. And also my older Dharma friends, the older disciples, have pervaded, have distributed these 37 practices and also trained in them. And so some might think that this is politics, but actually it is not. Because if one understands only karma, we help others to open their eyes, like opening the two eyes. And so knowing that, many of my disciples now also are distributing these practices. Actually, there are some of the newer disciples who only encountered that book, the 37 practices, and they said, that's all I need. I don't need anything else. Actually, that's a sign that they are very intelligent, because it really is sufficient if you only have the 37 practices. Only through that, for example, I was able to save so many people from committing suicide. So the 37 practices really are so important. And so I'm just a small teacher, but in this world many great spiritual masters come. So you should also rely on them. They all really are very kind. They all are a sangha. Their form is a sangha. Their words is the Dharma, and their mind is the Buddha. They all are very kind, and therefore you should regard them with devotion and a pure perception. And share with others whatever you know. For example, if you truly believe in karma, then share that with others. Whatever you are confident in will also benefit others, even if you do not know much else, like myself. There's some people who come to listen to my instructions, who like to hear my instructions, and I'm passing on to them really my experience of the 37 practices, whether it is on a small scale or to 500 or 1,000 people. So that is most important, because the greatest benefit we can bring to others is sharing the Dharma with them. And the Dharma really means to understand karma, cause and effect. So whatever my senior disciples are certain of, you should share that to the best of your abilities also with others. And so that will really resolve our difficulties, because it is because we think about what happened in the past, we create suffering, or we anticipate the future and we create suffering, or things happen suddenly right now and we experience suffering. And so these three types of suffering make our mind become solid like a block of ice. And so therefore it is so important and beneficial to understand the workings of karma.
가시 로마까지 트와틀리는 비냐면 침보 연구도 강의들은 가시 로마 가시겠다 트와틀리 틀만 보고 봐요. 다들 내가 톰 지수 톰 맞아. 이는 다 강의들은 들이 레라다 사독자도 들이 작주 테크니션은 제와요. 드라마 성시 배샤타만 미용을 줘 성시 들이 대답을 싸움을 때 나타마다를 들어서 동네 세물동에 고복을 렘도 어떤 말이 들 싸움을 나타자 마다지 찍는 물리차지 이거래 있는 무지 레사네 레들 샤과지 지나 어때를 지금 나서는 민주를 지금 레지 동네에 용나요 진짜 나타지 좁아 탑을 조직에 좁다고요. 배로 보고 동행을 지금 로바 체제를 રાખ요. 배는 나사가 동행을 제가 미피지를 자야요. 그 가글 해야 돼. 레지 싸죠. 저 샤와치요. 오, 레지가 매버래지요. 레지비 짜는 맛이 주 먹이 가서 더블 레지 샤와 짜는 맛이 배는 매지 동동 매지 동동 다 적성산데 또 뒤에 비세요. 매지 동이 셔서 따이 나사지 쉬고 요리 좋아하면 별래 제외는 들 나타마다 레상거 요리 저리 미용단체에다 다 파당에서 다 샤강에 요나 문이자다 민康타마지 미용거든 야제도 요리 속다 타면 소용스는 저거를 밑도 타면 걸 팽기요. 다른 거 소소를 저러 마음 발라서 문이 저때 문이 해라래. 시에케바 카케바 말이에요. 또 소소를 매가리면 미용을 팽강을 빼셔 같이 떠나 내려지는 팽강도 요래. 속다를 소용스는 또 매가리만 또가 쪼지도 똥톡을 내주리지 시소나. 저희들 오 랍산지 도봐. 그게 뭐 그들이 생명을 차도 나타지게 잘 내장을 매우 돌아다니 얼마나 마음소나 다시 약고 차송 사람들이 쓰는 좋다고 그래. 다시 효성상 유바께나 들이 사이 셔라지 동에 저들이 배샤진 zem바사 동에 세나지 냠들 배샤 파도 세나 설렘네. 들이 레다 세나를 들이 다 보여래. 들이 다 무슨 속차는 됐다고 했더니 이다가족 대들이 망고 요래들이 마땅사 매배들이 고아토바도 우리 손에들이 내려서 속차 탐지 타졌다가 근데 딱제 당신의 때도 마음 통야 요래들 들이 좀매봐 이제속 중에 때도 동에 주고 요래 강에 이제 세나에서 와래 제외는 당소 또 파도 속당 내 바자 데라서 봐라 속당 들이 제속 세나 저가 제리เป็นรูปข้างหน้าทรงน้ำประชาพัฒน์ที่รูปข้างที่อยากเจริญไม่ว่าบุตรเดชบ่าแต่รูปข้างก็จะทรงนั้นแต่เพียงอยู่ที่สัมพันธ์ที่กาวตัวบ้านเนี่ยสิ่งนั้นไม่ที่ส่วนนั้นมันจัดทุกอย่างที่แต่ว่าที่จุดเดียวสั่งต่างกันคาเรน่ะที่เดียวจัดทุกอย่างเลยเดี๋ยวไปจุดตรงนี้ที่อยู่นะโอ้ที่ตรงนี้ก็จะยุ่งหมดเลยสดๆยาทั้งยุ่งหมดแต่ดก다가 지게 내 장조리지 별로 나도 좀 강하지는 좀 걸어지 받아 수남리지 다가다 가라 싸타봐 몇 손을 끼자 끼에타봐 너희 가려는 커트봐도 좀 하게 필요를 했어 남용리 다다다 대화에 좋고 요리 되지 동네리지네 제타면 상못하나 오 대화를 줘드리지 너희 대화를 줘도 제도 동의나 제타 다네 제토고 요리 상못하나 너희 대화를 줘도 제타고 줘보고 그래서
So then there was one disciple before who came for a question, who said, now for many years actually I didn't get an opportunity to ask you any question, to talk to you. So I was waiting until now to be able to speak to you. In the meantime, I was very sick for many years. Actually, I had like 20 or 30 surgeries in those few years, and still actually I'm not better. I did not recover from my illness. And now after having done all these surgeries, also I've lost all my money on the medical bills, and I'm still not actually recovered. So they suffer a lot, but actually when it comes to curing or recovering or not recovering from an illness, there is actually two types of illness sort of that ripen. So one has accumulated that karma, one has created the karma for that illness in the past life. And there's two different types of individuals. So the one has created that karma and has also confessed that then later on in that life. They have regretted that. And so now in this life, the karma still ripens, but because they have regretted, confessed in the past life, it will become somewhat lighter. That karma is lighter. For example, they get sick, but then there's a way out for them. For example, medical treatment is successful and they recover. Some kind of help comes along, or for example, somebody gets very poor, and then a sponsor comes and helps them. So they do experience difficulty, but then there's always some sort of rescue that comes and helps them. For example, medical treatment and so on. So although they have created the karma, it ripens, they have also confessed in the past life. And then the other type, the second type, is one who has committed the same karma, the same action, but that karma cannot be changed at all, and that is because they have not confessed, they have not regretted what they have done in that life, because they do not understand karma at all. So they have done something wrong and felt no regret. For example, they have abused and beaten others all the time, but they felt that that was a good thing and they did feel no regret. And then they died with that mind. Now, in this life, the karma ripens as an illness, but there's nothing they can do about it. That karma cannot be changed. And there's nobody that will come to help them. So they both have the karma, but one has confessed and one has not confessed. So another way also to think about it is that once you have, for example, spent a lot of money on medical bills, then you should not think that this is like such a hardship, but actually think that all the medical bills that you have paid are actually benefiting the hospital, because the hospital then can help many more thousands of people. They all live on those medical bills. And also, for example, if you pay a school tuition, then it helps the school to survive. So actually this is really true. I'm not just saying that. This actually really is really true. And if you see it in this way, then whatever you give, whatever you pay for, you will give it with great joy. You will want to give it. You will laugh once you have gave it away. You laugh about it. Your mind feels very light. And actually, you have not really lost anything, because you have gained merit for the future. But on the other hand, if you think, oh, I have lost all this money, you regret, you feel a loss. And then when you die with that sense of loss, that grasping, you die with a mind that grasps at your money that you have lost, then you are born as a hungry spirit in the future. Because a hungry spirit basically is the manifestation of avarice or stinginess. You don't want to let go. So what has gone is all your money, and what comes to you is all your stinginess. And so as a result, you're born as a hungry spirit. And a hungry spirit is also something that we can observe, for example, in the animal realm. They appear in various forms, for example, with large bellies and so on, insatiable, and so on. So actually, if we really think about karma carefully, we can really see the manifestations of all these beings in this world. And then also, of course, there are beings without a body, and they also experience the same suffering. Those hungry spirits experience the suffering that comes from their stinginess. It is because they don't want to let go of what they have, their wealth. Or for example, to give a different example, if you go to stay in a hotel, in a guest house, then just think when you're paying for your bill, that this benefits everyone who's staying here. It benefits the business of the guest house, and that helps anyone who is staying here. So if you think that everything you give away somehow will be of benefit, you will accumulate great merit. Thinking in this way, it becomes actually very beneficial. Then, on the other hand, if you experience suffering, you should recognize that the cause of that is my negative emotion. And that negative emotion is here, present in my mind right now. And also, my experience of suffering is purifying this negative karma. So if you think about karma in this way, you really have a tool to transform any difficulty into happiness. For example, myself, when I was in prison, I was actually very happy. For example, at that time, it was very difficult, but because I was able to transform that difficulty into happiness now, in the later part of my life, through this experience, for example, I can eat any kind of food, or I can talk to any person, I can forbear any kind of difficulty, any kind of hardship. Nothing seems too difficult for me. And so that is really the experience I have gained in the prison time. So that is a way to really find happiness in the midst of difficulties when you experience suffering. If you know karma, you can transform difficulties into happiness. For example, in the early part of my life, I experienced difficulty, but now in the later part of my life, I am able to transform that into happiness. For this reason, and that is very important, if you understand karma, then now you're able to accept suffering and you're able to transform it into a great happiness. Especially in Western countries, people like to make a lot of plans for the future. And it is important to make plans. You should make your plans. But whether or not you will accomplish those plans depends on your karma. If you don't understand karma, then you will try very hard to accomplish something. You really want to accomplish something. You really want to get something. And you try to get that by any means. And then if you don't accomplish it, if you're unsuccessful, then you're very sad and broken. If you understand karma, then on the other hand, you will see it a bit lighter. You will think that I want to do that, I want to accomplish that, but whether or not I will be successful depends on my karma. If I am successful, then it was given to me by the 3 jewels. If I do not accomplish it, actually can resolve all kinds of other thinking. So if I am successful, it's the blessings of the 3 jewels. If not, there are no regrets, it is my karma. Even if you encounter some sudden difficulty, something very, very powerful happens, you're able to resolve it in this way. And so also, especially when you encounter these sudden difficulties, according to the Buddhist view, we practice Yidam deity. We supplicate to Tara or any other Yidam deity. And so then that Yidam deity should appear in your mind. And that actually will temporarily also melt the ice in your mind. It protects your mind. When you think too much, all this thinking is what solidifies your mind like ice. It keeps your mind in bondage. It fetters your mind. So when you think of the deity, you develop wisdom, and then through your awareness and the blessings of the deity, the thinking, the grasping thinking will be shattered. And so thinking of the deity, therefore, is very beneficial. So especially when you encounter some sudden circumstances, this is really a way to overcome them. And moreover, not only does the deity help you to shatter your thoughts, also because your awareness increases, you will find some other way, some other method to deal with your problem. You will be able to escape thoughts of committing suicide and so on. So according to the Buddhist view, we rely on a deity, a Yidam deity. Actually, from my own personal experience, just to practice the Yidam deity has really saved my own life several times. So that is really a way to resolve all difficulties of the past, of the future, and our suffering we experience now. So it is through understanding karma and relying on the Yidam deity.
Thank you. I will thank God. Thank you.